Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pete Peterson, founder and chairman of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, and Michael Peterson, president and CEO of the Peterson Foundation.
I hope you're going to feel that way after I talk. Over the years, I've written about 6 books, most of them in one aspect or another of our long-term future. And there were times that it was absolutely fun. And people say to me, how can it be fun to write a book? Well, most people don't have Ted Sorensen, President Kennedy's brilliant assistant, to write their jokes for them. But I talked to Ted, who was a dear friend, one day, and he said, I'll be happy to write some jokes for you, but only on one condition. You have to bear the brunt of the joke. I said, I'm a confirmed masochist, so I don't care about that. But I couldn't wait on the occasion of the first book he'd written jokes for, where he was chairing the event. And he said, let me tell you about Peterson's book, Running on Empty. Once you put it down, you will not be able to pick it up. The point, however, I'm trying to make, as a result of all this book writing and thinking, we have a long-term problem. And unfortunately, the solutions are tough. Tough substantively, tough politically. And the result of that is we tend to, as someone said recently, have an obsessive focus on the short term. Now, I had to think about what I was going to do in my retirement years. And I've been talking about this long-term problem for several years. So I thought about the idea of a permanent organization whose mission was to try to do something about this long-term debt. Now, what I was really saying is, Peterson, it's time you put your fat mouth or your money where your fat mouth is. And that was the foundation of the Peterson Foundation. To give you just a quick idea, and what I urge you to do is look at the materials our research people have put together for you. But if you look at the debt of the United States and project it for more than a few years, you have the following phenomena, which Michael and others will talk about. A very gentle curve for a number of years, and then a huge steep rise, which ends up with debt at, many people would forecast, 2 to 3 times GDP. Now that's just unthinkable. Now to give you an idea of what the elements are that cause this explosion of long-term debt, start with entitlements. They are 100% of the long-term increase in spending. It's hard for me to visualize a substantive reform that doesn't do something about the entitlements. Secondly, we have a new word we're using called tax expenditures. That is a euphemism of sorts for tax subsidies. but they are much larger than most people understand. They amount to about 80% of the total revenues, both corporate and individual, in the country, and are one important source of our long-term problem. Now, in my view, and I urge you to study the numbers and think about your view, these levels of debt are simply unsustainable. And I was presumably educated at the University of Chicago. And I remember one of our professors used to say, if something's unsustainable, it tends to stop. Well, what are the possible reactions to this unsustainable debt? Frankly, no one can tell, but one can envision several outcomes, all of which are very serious. Next, there could be very large increases in interest rates. These large increases could happen quickly, but even if they happened over a few years, the increases might be so large as to have a serious effect on our economy. We could have a financial crisis, as we have seen in Europe and elsewhere, where markets react very suddenly and seriously. You know, there's an advantage that a 90-year-old has, and I'm happy to tell you, I'm still around to celebrate my 90th birthday. You might applaud, so I think I'm doing it. But one thing is clear. While awareness of this problem is important, essential, it's not enough. We need to focus management of our country, our businesses, our foundations around this long-term issue. I used to hear about compound probability. I hope you remember it. But it has something to do with two independent events happening at the same time. So we were looking for someone who could be the chief executive of our entity. And we looked at two elements that were essential. One, that they be very bright, because the problem is a sophisticated problem. And the other, that they have a commitment to the problem. The odds of finding both those characteristics in one person seem very remote. But we were happy to find that person in our midst. His name is Michael Peterson. He is not only brilliant and not only a very able leader and manager, but he has a second quality. He has a deep and sincere interest in the subject of this foundation. So now it's my immense pleasure to introduce to you the Chief Executive of the Foundation, Michael Peterson.